Embrace yourself. And if you don't want to be triggered, maybe keep scrolling. But if you after some real healing shit, because as you know, the only thing that can heal us is the truth. This one is going to be about the feminine and masculine from a different angle. I hope this is going to help. If you're trying to heal, if you're trying to... No, I don't hope. I know this is going to help a lot of people, because this is not something that is being talked about. If you're trying to heal yourself and you're trying to name your pain and process your pain and metabolize your pain in any way, work on your nervous system or whatever, and if you're trying to basically build a good life for yourself, for your children, whether you're a woman or a man, this one is difficult, because not only in my own history, the subject of abuse has been going on for quite a long time, but we very often in the society today, we blame the men, and obviously that's part of the story, but it's not the whole story. So I want to bring your attention and awareness to something that runs really deep. So this is what I've been experiencing, seeing in my clients, in my life, all around me, all the time. And, you know, as they say, what you see is what you need to address. So I think we've done blaming men enough. We sort of beat it to death, how horrible they are and things. But I want to talk about the enablers, right? No abuse, no narcissism can continue or be sustained or exist without an army of female enablers. So it can be a difficult one, but we can do this, right? So let's do this. Every abuser, narcissistic person needs a system to exist, right? It's not created in a vacuum. It's created in a system. As I said, we've been, pointing a finger at men enough, and that's part of the story. But underneath all this, I want to talk about an owning to female part, because what I've seen is the following. Women are enablers. Women think that they're rescuing someone. Basically, they don't own up to their own role in what's happening, right? And what has happened. We're very good at blaming and shaming and pointing fingers, but we're not very good at really owning up to the fact that these are systems, very well established systems, and you can see it being manifested in every scandal, really, that's happening in front of our eyes. So the smallest particle of society is the family, right? So we need to look at our own families and really see, okay, who is the abuser is very obvious, but who is the enabler is not. Because enablers are very often disguised in victims. They're the victims who didn't know any better. They were just helping. They did their best, or they didn't know what to do, right? And they wanted to, for their own personal gain. And I think that's the difficult bit here, is to understand that our mothers, grandmothers, sisters, friends are very often part of the problem. So when you're trying to heal, you need to really understand the history of your family and who's responsible for what. I'm not talking about confronting them. I'm talking about understanding how the ego really manipulates it all. It's a sort of a darker part of the feminine, right? And the shadow part of the feminine and of women. Women are manipulators. They weaponize a different thing to men. So men have physical intimidation, financial intimidation very often, right? It's the bodily, physical strength. That's their ego, right? And the abusers, they obviously manipulate their victims. But women, they weaponize a completely different thing. They weaponize their sexual energy. They weaponize their emotional powers, psychological powers, mental powers, right? So when you're trying to heal, look at the history of your family and try and see who was the enabler. Because it's not that obvious, unless it's obvious to you, so that's great. But usually it's not, because female have the tendency to protect the female. We all have the tendency to protect our mothers, our sisters, right? But then that shit continues. And there's a lot of abuse going on in terms of women abusing men, because the enablers are also female narcissists in the making. It's a really tricky one. But it's almost always the case, right? It's the drama. It's creating this thing, not holding anyone accountable, and obviously never yourself, right? So this is why the shit continues to go on. And unless you name it and see it in your own family and decide to end it with you and make it conscious, you're going to repeat the pattern, right? You're going to repeat the pattern. That's the thing about female psyche, that we think that something was done out of love, then that justifies it. No, it doesn't. Because if you're trying to control someone, if you're trying to intimidate someone, right, that's not love. And very often they're enabling the shit that goes on, and they're manipulating everyone around them. And, you know, they're their victims. And again, narcissist is always the victim in the end. I mean, the end of the relationship or whatever, right? So make sure that your endless compassion and empathy for your mothers, sisters, grandmothers, whatever, doesn't cloud your judgment, discernment, when it comes to understanding who is playing what role. So if you suffered abuse in your family, it's usually because your mother didn't do what she's supposed to do, didn't call out the behaviors, and she enabled that to happen, or the grandmother, right? So you need to really be mindful, and it can take some time. But then again, it's very easy to say, oh, he was a narcissist and he's a narcissist, right? But no one can see, and no one can actually call out our own part here. I'm talking to women, right? And because those patterns will play out in your children, in your relationships, right? You're going to say and do stuff just because your mother did that, or this is how you do things. No. And that's why we're in this mess. And we need to clear this mess collectively, one by one, and start with ourselves, with our own story, bring shit from the unconscious into conscious, understanding the patterns in the family. There's no other way. But that's great, because there's a lot that can be done. And it starts with you taking ownership of what has really happened and why, right? Because if we continue to allow this to happen, it will never end. And healing trauma is about also deciding and regulating your nervous system, that certain things cannot go on. Because there's a lot of suffering as well, right? And those women then, they become the wives who are trying to control everything, who are trying to control their children, and it's just a mess. It's a mess. It's a mess you don't want to be a part of. Never give up on yourself.